That's not a knife. That's a knife. Crocodile Dundee wasn't just a quirky fish-out-of-water comedy. It was a global cultural earthquake, part blockbuster, part tourism campaign, part fever dream cooked up in the Australian outback. What audiences didn't know was that behind the laughs and swagger, the production was marred by wild accidents, volatile egos, shady deals, and a dark side that Hollywood worked hard to hide. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 weird facts about Crocodile Dundee, 1986. The scandals, dangers, and bizarre twists you never saw on screen. And wait until you hear the bonus fact. It's the kind of secret that rewrites how you see the entire film. Let's dive into the swamp of secrets. Paul Hogan wrote the script in secret. Paul Hogan wasn't just the star, he was the mind behind Mick Dundee. But here's the kicker. Hogan quietly wrote the screenplay himself, disguising it as a collaborative project with Ken Shady and John Cornell. Industry insiders say this was less about teamwork and more about dodging union scrutiny. Hogan later admitted he wanted total control over Dundee's voice and mannerisms, fearing Hollywood writers would get it wrong. The gamble worked, but it fueled controversy in Australia, where critics accused him of sidelining more experienced screenwriters. What audiences saw as a charming character was, in reality, Hogan's unfiltered alter ego, crafted line by line in late-night writing sessions. Real crocodiles nearly killed the crew. Not all the crocs in Crocodile Dundee were rubber models. Some were very real and dangerously close. During filming in Kakadu National Park, wranglers used trained crocodiles, but their behavior was unpredictable. One scene with Linda Kozlowski required her to lean near the water's edge. Just off camera, a massive saltwater croc lunged so violently that crew members yanked her back at the last second. Locals warned the production, "These things don't play." It wasn't just acting, survival instincts kept the cast alive. What looks like comic adventure on screen was, behind the scenes, a thin line between movie magic and a real-life mauling. The Sydney filming almost imploded. The New York scenes were meticulously planned, but Sydney? Total chaos. The city was thrown into gridlock when filming permits clashed with commuter hours. Locals cursed the production, calling it disruptive and arrogant. Hogan later joked that Sydney hated us more than the Crocs. Crew reports suggest morale collapsed during the urban shoot. Equipment delays, shouting matches, and budget overruns nearly derailed the schedule. For a film about bridging two cultures, the irony was brutal. Australians themselves weren't happy about Dundee shutting down their streets. Not the proud hometown reception Hogan expected. Linda Kozlowski risked her career. Linda Kozlowski wasn't a Hollywood star when she landed the role of Sue Charlton. She was a struggling actress, but the production nearly broke her career before it began. Industry whispers say she was pressured to accept long hours in sweltering, dangerous conditions, all while constantly compared to Paul Hogan's charisma. Rumors spread that producers considered replacing her mid-shoot, fearing she lacked screen magnetism. Instead, Kozlowski powered through, and her chemistry with Hogan became the film's emotional core. Off-screen, she won more than just credibility. She won Hogan himself, beginning a romance that upended both their lives. The knife scene was more dangerous than it looked. That famous line, "That's a knife," almost ended in blood. The oversized prop blade was real steel, sharpened for realism, and Hogan insisted on wielding it himself. Extras playing muggers stood just feet away as he swung the massive weapon, with no protective barriers in place. Crew members later admitted they were terrified someone would be cut. OSHA-style safety wasn't part of Australian film culture at the time, and the knife sequence became a reckless gamble. On screen, it's iconic comedy. On set, it was a genuine hazard, one bad slip away from turning into a crime scene. The studio didn't believe in it. Here's the wild truth. Paramount Pictures didn't think Crocodile Dundee would make a dime. Executives saw it as too Australian and doubted American audiences would understand the slang, humor, or Bushman charm. Early test screenings proved them wrong. Audiences roared with laughter, and word of mouth exploded. Paramount scrambled to increase the marketing budget, spinning Dundee into an exotic hero. Ironically, the very thing execs thought would flop, the Australian identity, became the movie's biggest selling point. What was dismissed as a local curiosity transformed into a global juggernaut, shocking Hollywood insiders who had quietly bet against it. Hogan versus the unions. Paul Hogan's rise with Crocodile Dundee sparked a brutal battle with Australia's actor and writer unions. He had started as a TV comedian with little formal training, and union leaders despised how he bypassed traditional gatekeeping. Rumors swirled that crew members were pressured into working non-standard hours and conditions, fueling resentment. Hogan brushed it off, insisting he was making a film for the people, not the bureaucrats. The unions saw it differently, accusing him of exploiting loopholes. Behind the charming smile, Hogan was waging a war against Australia's entertainment establishment, and winning. New York extras went rogue. The New York street scenes looked polished, but in reality, chaos erupted. Many of the extras weren't seasoned professionals. They were actual New Yorkers promised quick cash. Some refused to follow directions, while others shouted obscenities at Hogan mid-scene, ruining takes. A subway sequence nearly collapsed when real commuters pushed past the cameras, furious at the disruption. At one point, an exasperated assistant director shouted, "This city doesn't care about your movie?" The raw authenticity on screen came at the price of genuine hostility from the very people who became Dundee's American backdrop. The Outback was a nightmare to film. On paper, the Australian outback provided stunning visuals. In practice, it was merciless. Temperatures soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, frying equipment and exhausting cast and crew. Insects swarmed relentlessly. Flies, mosquitoes, and leeches tormented everyone. Crew members collapsed from dehydration. Even the cameras jammed from dust storms that blew across the set without warning. Locals warned that nature would win, and it nearly did. Each sweeping shot of red earth and endless skies came at the cost of blistered skin, lost days of filming, and a production teetering on disaster. The Outback wasn't just a setting, it was an antagonist. Linda Kozlowski's breaking point. Kozlowski may have delivered a graceful performance, but behind the camera, she was pushed to her limits. Long hours, constant sweltering heat, and the danger of filming near wild animals left her physically drained. In interviews, she confessed she cried on set, convinced she wouldn't survive the shoot. Her most vulnerable moment came during the waterfall scene, filmed in freezing water while swarms of mosquitoes bit relentlessly. Kozlowski later said she wanted to run away and never come back. Ironically, that pain translated into authenticity on screen, cementing her as Dundee's equal rather than just his love interest. Paul Hogan's tax troubles began here. What audiences didn't see was that the global success of Crocodile Dundee planted the seeds of Paul Hogan's later financial scandals. The movie became one of the highest-grossing films worldwide in 1986, pulling in over $300 million. But the profits triggered intense scrutiny from the Australian Taxation Office. Insiders say the revenue split between Hogan, producers, and distributors was deliberately tangled, funneling money through offshore accounts. While Hogan always denied wrongdoing, the film marked the beginning of decades-long tax investigations. Behind Dundee's easy grin was a man unknowingly walking into years of courtroom battles. The knife prop went missing. That legendary giant knife? It mysteriously disappeared after filming. Crew members later admitted multiple replicas were made, but the main hero prop vanished from set storage. Rumors swirled that a stuntman pocketed it, while others claimed it was stolen during transport to the U.S. premiere. Collectors have since paid thousands for verified Dundee knives, but the original has never been confirmed to resurface. What's bizarre is how central the knife became to the movie's identity, yet its physical symbol, sharp, dangerous, and iconic, vanished into legend, just like the character himself. Paul Hogan's on-set ego. While Hogan charmed audiences, some crew members described his behavior as difficult, even controlling. As both star and writer, He demanded changes to dialogue and direction, often clashing with cinematographer Russell Boyd. Hogan wanted Dundee portrayed as flawless, a Bushman superhero, while Boyd pushed for grittier realism. At one point, shouting matches disrupted filming, delaying production. Hogan's insistence on creative control created rifts, but it also preserved the mythic Dundee persona that defined the film. What audiences got was Hogan's vision, polished and heroic, while the messier reality stayed hidden in the dailies. A real snake infiltrated the set. One day during filming in Kakadu, panic erupted when a large python slithered onto the set. Crew members froze as the snake coiled under equipment, halting production. Local animal wranglers calmly removed it, but not before several takes were ruined by cast members freaking out. Linda Kozlowski reportedly screamed so loudly that Hogan quipped, "That'll sell tickets." What makes this moment eerie is how the real wildlife refused to stay off camera. While Dundee wrestles crocs on screen, the crew themselves were wrestling with Australia's unforgiving and very alive ecosystem. The Outback Bar almost burned down. The famous Walkabout Creek pub, home to Mick Dundee's introduction, was filmed in an actual Northern Territory hotel. During production, a lighting rig overheated, sparking a fire that nearly destroyed the building mid-shoot. Locals rushed in with buckets of water while the crew scrambled to save expensive gear. The pub was saved, but charred beams had to be patched before more filming could continue. To this day, the pub trades on its Dundee fame, but the reality is, it came dangerously close to being reduced to ashes before the movie even premiered. The crocodile attack scene was faked with movie magic. One of the most thrilling moments in Crocodile Dundee is when Mick rescues Sue from a lunging crocodile. Viewers gasped at the realism, but behind the scenes, it was pure danger cloaked in trickery. The production used a mix of animatronic models and stock footage of real crocs spliced together. What audiences didn't know was that the animatronic frequently malfunctioned, snapping its jaws dangerously close to Kozlowski. Crew members later admitted they held their breath during every take, terrified she'd get caught in the steel mouth. What plays as a quick, heroic rescue was, in reality, hours of nerve-wracking trial and error. The US version was censored and recut. American audiences never saw the same movie Australians did. Paramount executives demanded cuts to Aussie slang and cultural references, fearing US viewers wouldn't understand. Roughly 5 minutes of dialogue were trimmed, altering jokes and even softening Dundee's more raw Bushman humor. Hogan was furious, calling it a butchering, but he had little choice if he wanted US distribution. Ironically, the Americanized version became the definitive cut worldwide, leaving Australian fans grumbling that international audiences had only seen a diluted Dundee. What was meant as translation turned into cultural erasure. Hogan and Kozlowski's forbidden romance. The sparks between Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski weren't just scripted, they were real. But there was a problem. Hogan was married with children when filming began. Rumors spread quickly across the set that the two leads were spending time together off camera. Hogan denied it, but soon after the movie's release, he divorced his wife and began a public relationship with Kozlowski. What began as on-set chemistry turned into one of Hollywood's most controversial romances. Fans swooned at their fairy tale love story, but behind it was heartbreak, scandal, and the unraveling of Hogan's personal life. The Outback locals felt exploited. The film painted the Northern Territory as exotic, adventurous, and full of quirky characters. But locals weren't all flattered. Some Aboriginal communities criticized the movie for turning their culture into comic relief, pointing to the character of Neville Bell as a caricature. Others argued that the film boosted tourism but left little benefit for the actual communities. Paul Hogan dismissed the critiques, saying the film was a comedy, not a documentary. Still, the backlash lingered, with Indigenous voices calling Dundee both a global ambassador and a cultural thief. The Outback's beauty came at the price of its people's dignity. The set was plagued by injuries. From heat stroke to cuts to animal scares, the Crocodile Dundee set became a minefield of minor disasters. Crew members collapsed under the harsh sun, Medics rushed in for dehydration cases, and one camera operator was hospitalized after falling on rocky terrain. The pressure to keep shooting meant many injured crew returned before they had fully recovered. Linda Kozlowski herself suffered bruises from stunt rehearsals, while Hogan's hands were cut multiple times during prop handling. What audiences laughed at on screen came at a very real human cost: blood, sweat, and exhaustion. Dundee was nearly a TV show, not a movie. Here's the twist no one saw coming. Crocodile Dundee almost never made it to theaters. Early on, Hogan and his partners pitched it as a six-part Australian television miniseries. Networks passed, calling it too niche. When a financier suggested reshaping it as a feature film, the project exploded into international success. Imagine that. One of the most iconic movie comedies of the 1980s could have been a forgotten TV special. The razor-thin line between obscurity and global dominance hinged on that one pivot. Crocodile Dundee wasn't just a charming comedy about an Aussie bushman finding his way in New York. It was a production forged in chaos, controversy, and danger. Behind the laughs lay egos, injuries, cultural clashes, and secrets that Hollywood never wanted you to know. Yet somehow, through all the turmoil, it became a timeless global hit. So next time you hear Mick Dundee say, "That's a knife," remember, the sharpest cuts weren't on screen. They were behind the scenes. If you enjoyed uncovering these dark secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because there's always another story lurking beneath the surface of Hollywood's biggest hits.